Well, good evening to all. I would like to thank very much Ambassador Minuto Rizzo and Professor Foliti, as well as the NATO Foundation, for this event tonight, which I am chairing this panel. And I would like to say good evening to the panelists, Madam Deputy Prime Minister, Madam, Sir. It is a pleasure to have you here tonight at this panel. I must admit that I have the feeling that this panel is eventually the most delicate of the three panels we had here today, and we shall do our best to answer your expectations, because it is not a technical panel, it is a panel which has a lot of other dimensions which we will have to look at and respect. So I would like to start by inviting the panelists. First of all, we have Mrs. Slavica Gurkovska, which is the Deputy Prime Minister of North Macedonia, Ms. Alba Cela, who is from Tirana, and Mr. Francesco Martino, analyst and editor, Osservatorio Balcani, Caucaso, Trans-Europa, based in Sofia, I believe, no?
I'm personally based in Sofia.
Yes, you are based in Sofia, yes. So let me say a few words with the issue that we have to deal with this evening. Obviously, the title itself, Fragile Democracies, is a delicate title, as I said earlier. And that is because all the countries of the area do not share the same background. They have come through different processes with different models that had been adapted over the years, and the transformation has, of course, not been automatic. It means that the idea of good governance, of lack of corruption, of the correct judiciary, all these are parts of a non-failed democracy. So this is a very important issue, because the future of the area and the fact that we can connect and share and trust one another means that we have to find ways to have lively, efficient, real, transparent democracies. And in that sense, as we have different backgrounds, of course, in front of us, we have, some of us, we have the issue of entering the European Union, and there are some norms over the years that have to be respected in that sense. And that is why I think that talking about good democratic governance is a very important issue that we shall share tonight when we talk together. Obviously, there are influences in the area. Influences that sometimes are not the best. They have gained maybe space over the last years, and they're not the best examples to be followed. So we have to organize ourselves, I believe, so as to fight what is the wrong message of a functioning democracy and build on the positive elements. So I would like to start by giving the floor to you, Deputy Prime Minister, if you would like to let us know your opinion on this issue.
Thank you very much. I have to admit that I stand here today with mixed feelings. On one hand, I'm very privileged to be here, to have the opportunity to share my thoughts with you on these very important issues. But on the other hand, I'm very sad because we are witnessing this event while we are facing the biggest security crisis since the end of the Cold War. So Russia proved to us that peace cannot be taken for granted, and that the rules-based international order can be challenged and is being challenged, because we are not talking about dealing with a peace, with a war, but also how to preserve human rights, the basic democratic values, the real values, I would say, and to keep them still the priorities for the societies. The citizens of the Republic of North Macedonia now could have realized the importance of being a member of NATO alliance. Nevertheless, it was not a very easy decision for Macedonia to achieve that goal. It was a long-term political struggle to achieve that. It was not very popular, and of course, it needs brave leaders to achieve that goal. Why I'm saying this, referring to populism that we have discussed previously, even meeting with Solomon Pasi, but he was talking about that. It is very easy to be a politician and to say whatever the citizens want to hear, but it needs really a courage to keep your country on track, to keep the region on track, believing in the real values, in the democratic values, in the stability, in the prosperity, looking into the future. So today, when we are talking about preserving stability, peace, and security, the base of it, the root of it, are the good governance policies that needs to be established on the high level in all our societies in the region. Because if we want to have stability in the country, first we need to have a trust, to gain the trust of the citizens. Second, we need to have institutions that the citizens can trust. We need to have a public administration that will be citizen-oriented, to serve as their servant, not the opposite. To have a system which will be resilient on corruption. And I'm not idealistic that we can achieve zero corruption, because there is no such country in the world. It cannot be. They are pretty much innovative in finding million ways how to use the holes in the law. But if we have stable institutions that are transparent, efficient, working professionally, resilient on political influence, if we have judicial system that is making the decision and the procedure, having the case based on law, no matter what kind of cases they have, no matter if they have a high-level politician, businessman, or citizens, the laws should prevail equally for everybody, no matter of whom we are talking about. Then that kind of society can be strong and resilient on any other outside influence, and actually it wouldn't we wouldn't have a room for nationalistic and populistic politicians and societies. So what we have done in the past 5 years, because it was not very easy from captive state to move forward, because it is very easy to play on a card on a nationalistic card, but it's very difficult to refer it back. And one of my biggest disappointment from this point of view is that the region haven't learned the lesson from the past, from the war in ex-Yugoslavia, that playing on the nationalistic cards, it is not a solution. But it's very, very actually difficult afterwards to go back on track. And that's why I'm very happy that we finally, unfortunately, because of war in Ukraine, we are again as a region in a number one priority for EU accession process. I'm very, very happy that we restarted Berlin process again, because unfortunately, we have to admit it, on the Balkans, we need whip. If we would like to achieve something, that we really need whip or someone to keep us on track, or otherwise, we have so many excuses, especially for those who wouldn't like to leave their comfort zone, and populistic leaders of the political parties who will find a way and abuse that to easily won the elections, be in power, and play on that card, which is not in favor of the progress of the societies, of the region, and of prosperity of the citizens. Thank you.
Well, you used the word populism, which is what Solomon Passi mentioned this evening. It is true that it is extremely important to fight with that word in the right way, and it is obvious that political power, political parties, the media, public opinion, and the capital should all agree on the fact that populism is something that does not pay, and it is not a solution on the way to gain access and become a reliable democracy. So would you like to tell us what is your feeling on the issue?
Yes, thank you very much. Also, I'm really happy to be in a forum that combines the perspective for Balkan and Black Seas, and I think it's really important to connect regions together, because we often from the Western Balkans find ourselves in forums that talk just between us. So we need more forums that talk to others. Our panel is dedicated to democracy, and you mentioned that democracy in this region is fragile. And I'm going to discuss with you that democracy everywhere is fragile. There is not a single place in the world where democracy is not fragile right now. You can see the fragility of democracy even in the most established and consolidated democracies in the world. And these are the democracies that we look to as examples. So the retreat or the decline of democratic standards in these countries is more frightening for us, because these are the examples that we look forward to. Everybody mentioned all the external threats and all the external hits that have come to the European Union and that have hit the region. And just briefly, not what is happening just in Ukraine, which of course it means a radical and dramatic thing, and it is one sentence. Our continent is at war. This is our Europe. We are here together, EU or not EU, and we are at war. And democracy, this fragile democracy, is the thing that we have to protect the most. Looking at it from the perspective of my own country, of Albania, which yesterday hosted the summit, and I was not there because I was here, but it is such an enormous change. And I'll tell you how a person from Albania looks at it. A person whose parents have been born into a communist system, a dictatorship, completely isolated from the world, different from all other countries, all other communist countries. And now it hosts this summit. Yes, this is a powerful signal. This is a powerful message that is being given. It is important also for the health and for the vitality of democracy in the region, because it brings back this feeling that there is a path that we are traveling together. For a long time, we were stuck on this path, and all the obstacles that were being presented to us were not democratic. They were not about standards, they were about bilateral disputes, they were about the political vetoes. So this region is fragile also because of the past that it has spent under dictatorship with different degrees. All the countries of former Yugoslavia, when I compare them to the experience of my country, much more liberal, much more connected to the world. But what makes us very fragile also is the way we react to the external threats. I'll tell you another example. It's not just these countries that you mentioned about external influence. They are very well known, China, Russia. But for example, in Albania, we have had, since this summer, 2 massive cyber attacks from Iran. We happen to host a part of the Iranian political opposition in our country, trying to do the duty as a NATO member who has been asked to shelter people who are trying in a way to fight for their democracy, and that makes us very vulnerable. And these attacks actually hacked all the services, electronic services of Albania, which were created to provide citizens with well-being, which were created to facilitate transparency and access. All these are the core, the heart of democracy. And you have a foreign power that comes in and takes advantage of a country which is still trying to catch up economically, digitally, and here is where the EU needs to really think about what kind of assistance it promises. And so we had to take a hard look and say, okay, so now we are a target of a regime which is strong and which knows our vulnerabilities. And while we do all these reforms, which includes the digital reform, which is very important for the democracy and well-being of our country, makes us vulnerable. And what we realize is that all the challenges that we face, none of them can be solved individually. We need a lot of more regional cooperation, inclusive regional cooperation. Why do we need this? Because there have been examples in the past that when we work as a region and together with the EU, we can have good positive stories. I know we are in an environment, in a situation now when it's hard to think about the positive stories, but it's very important to think about positive stories. There are investigative journalists in our region working together, trying to bring more transparency, accountability. They need more resources. There are young people in our region, facilitated sometimes by RICO or other mechanisms, that are trying to push forward reconciliation, so important for democracy. If you don't live in the past conflict, hatred, misconceptions, prejudice, that democracy is very sick. So there are good positive stories when actors in the region come together, and they can do much more together because they are more able to surpass obstacles at the national level. And this is where the European Union should also invest more. I agree that it's important from the geostrategic point of view, but it's also important for the EU itself, the vitality of the EU itself. I'm probably one of these people that believes that you don't have to choose between widening and expanding. I know it's difficult and everybody has their own position, but a region that is so pro-European brings more vitality even to the reforms inside of the EU, so we don't need to choose this. Just to conclude, I think that there is much, much more unexplored territory in those opportunities that we have between each other. And the first step to think about this is that we are nations, countries in these regions who have chosen democracy and who have chosen to be part of this family of values. And this is the most important thing. One day we will tick all the boxes, but values, you either have them or you don't. And the most important of values is democracy. Thank you.
I fully agree with you because, as you know, you are my neighbors.
Yes.
And I am very proud that we are together tonight. And I must admit, I'm also very proud of Thessaloniki 2003 because this is the basis of what we're working with and what can take us further. And I was there in 2003 at that meeting, which was important. But of course, to build these democracies that we would like, which is strong and can face the difficulties, it means that we must also look at the positive models, because it is a fact that this world we live in is under attack. I mean, you mentioned one country, there are other countries also that are also not working in a positive way. So in order to face, we have to build our own democracies. To build, we have to believe from the civil society upwards that we really need to take the good examples and do our best to copy them, to learn from them, build our own systems. Mr. Martino.
Is the mic working? Sorry? Yes, okay. So good evening, everybody. First of all, thanks a lot to the organizers for inviting me tonight and giving me the opportunity to be with you. I've been asked to talk about the social support base of democracies in the region. And honestly, when I started thinking about it, I felt at the same time very happy because I think it's an extremely important question, but also very much challenged because it's also very complex and difficult to be addressed, especially when it comes as the last contribution to today's interesting conversation. I think it's a question that goes back in time. The best and the brightest philosophers, social scientists have been trying to give an answer for centuries, which are the factors, the structural factors which create a democratic society, which make it open or closed, make it tolerant or xenophobic. So in the little time I have at my disposal, I won't try, of course, to measure myself with the great minds of humanity. I will try in a humbler, probably more in a humbler way, just to give some hints, to sketch some possible interesting points which could give us a better perception of what is going on in the region. Of course, it is difficult to speak about the region because, as the chair very correctly pointed out, countries in this area can be very much diverse. So, of course, you know, it's a simplification to some extent. So, which are the trends? Are there trends that can be identified and can help us understand in a deeper way why we have such a bleak situation when it comes to democracies in the region nowadays? I think, of course, that there are some trends which can be identified, and most of them are long-term. And the bad thing with long-term trends, and I'm speaking as a journalist at the moment, is that they are very often the most important, but also very often very, I would say, not very visible in the media and in the public discussion. So the first one I would like to address, the first element, is demography. Why demography is so important? Because, of course, demography gives, I would say, a deeper structure to societies, and to a big extent also gives these societies, I would say, tools to address or not to address specific challenges. From this point of view, speaking about now Southeastern Europe, societies share a common, extremely difficult situation. Most of the countries are literally shrinking when it comes to their population, and I'll make just an example. Bulgaria, the country I live in, even if probably from my name you understood I'm from Italy. In the last census, 2021, recorded, I think, 6.5 million inhabitants, which is a 10% drop from the previous one, 10 years before. In 1989, the country had almost 10 million people. Not only the population is shrinking, the structure of the population is changing, it's becoming older, and this makes these societies less flexible and more insecure to some extent. Another question which is related to demography is also immigration. In these last decades, tens of thousands of people have been leaving the region, especially for EU countries, of course. And this is another factor which is making societies weaker and so democracies weaker. We are witnessing what is called a brain drain. Very often young people, highly skilled, are leaving these countries and making these societies weaker. Of course, it's not only, the situation is not only bleak, we have also some positive examples. For example, as Osservatorio, we recently carried out a research about innovative enterprises in the region, and we found out that there are hints of startups, innovative enterprises, which are being able to create clusters that are able to offer young people, highly skilled people in these countries a real perspective for their future. By the way, one of the examples was mentioned earlier in the discussion is the gaming industry in Serbia, which has been growing through the pandemics, even maybe thanks to the pandemic, and is able to today to give to a small number of people, but real perspectives, small signal that could be taken as an example for the future anyway. Of course, since I mentioned the pandemic, also the pandemic shaped Balkan societies a lot in these last years. Of course, the big issue with pandemics and democracy is how it shaped the relationship between citizens and authorities. In Southeastern Europe, very often this was extremely challenging because of the deep-rooted mistrust of large parts of societies here towards their own authorities. Is there a very last element which I would like to point out, and it is the growing request by Southeastern European societies for better conditions of life. People are asking for better conditions, a cleaner environment, and this is important from a democratic point of view, because these requests have taken more and more the aspect of political requests. So we've been witnessing all over the region to the birth of movements which are trying to push for better environment, which is very much important for, again, for people to want to see their future life in the region. Of course, there are also challenges here. One of them is that people who are engaged in environmental protection issues don't feel supported enough from the outside. And here, once again, the European Union, the culprit for everything, is very often called. And also the fact that in the Balkans, even green movements have shown the tendency, the possibility to be hijacked by populist movements. So these are the points that I wanted to point out, and I'll be glad to discuss them further.
Thank you.
With you.
Thank you very much. Madam Deputy Prime Minister, could I ask you, during the last couple of years, authoritarian leaders of Central and Eastern Europe, as well as the Western Balkans, found common interests and began building alliances as a counterweight to Western European democratic states. How have their interests intertwined to build these alliances? What is your opinion?
Well, as I stated already before, but it's very easy to manipulate people when dealing with fragile economies and struggling with the social issues. When you have a region which is very much connected, and each policy cannot be treated individually, and it has reflection on the whole region, then on the other hand, as much as it is a challenge for the progressive leaders, it is also an opportunity for those who would like to revert the whole region backslides in democracies and to actually keep the possibility for using the historical backgrounds and unreasonable issues which have nothing related with the future in power, so in behind, to be pretty much connected in corruption and for their own personal benefit, not for the benefit for the societies. And I think that is the main reason for those kind of alliance. That's why I think that we should be even more persistent. I think that North Macedonia is a very good and very positive example on how the country that would really like to join NATO and EU should behave in being persistent on the goals that we are sure that it is for our national interest, and to find a way how to make how to try to find the solutions thanks to the help and support of EU member state, NATO, United States of America. It was not easy. It is not easy. Those kind of decisions are not easy to be made, but actually it's worth it. I will tell you one example. When we have now, after the Prespa agreement, we have joined NATO, but back then, before that, it was, of course, a huge political debate about the decision if we are trading our nation or something like that. And we have been promised that we are going to become a NATO member country, and we will start with EU negotiations with EU immediately after we are going to make the compromise with Greece on name dispute. But afterwards, the promise about starting the negotiations with EU didn't happen. And what happened? We were not the only one that we have lost as a country. The whole region have lost. Why? Because that was an excellent excuse for the nationalists in the region to say, you see, they lied to them. They forced them to change the name of the country because of becoming NATO member country and starting the negotiations with EU. We in the region are negotiating for 10 years. We are forced to make difficult decisions and compromises. I'm talking about Serbia, with Kosovo and other countries in the region. Very fragile situation in Bosnia, unfortunately, which is very concerning these days. And they said, why we are going to make the efforts when they are going to lie as they lie to them. And that's why it's very important. I mean, I'm speaking about this, I don't know how many years ago, but even more now as Deputy Prime Minister, that all the policies, all the challenges, we cannot see them isolated. It is not linked with the situation in one country. We are so connected, and everything is linked and can be prevailed in other countries too.
Well, as you know, the EU process has always been a complicated process.
Yes,
and we cannot even say that there's one rule. There has never been one rule. There are rules, but they have to adapt, and we have to, that's how it has been. I personally believe that yesterday's step in Tirana is a positive renewal in the right direction, and I think that it can lead to something that will have a new speed and a new political, I think, outlook of how this area should proceed. So we have to believe in what happened yesterday and the results, and look forwards. Now, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask you something. Although some EU member states believe that regional cooperation in the Western Balkans is slow-going and at times impossible, the latest decades, and especially the last few years, have clearly shown that the will to cooperate is there. The latest example is the Open Balkan Initiative. However, does this regional cooperation, and especially this initiative which does not involve all the countries of the region, serve the purpose of strengthening democracies? What is your opinion?
Yes, Open Balkans is a very controversial topic, and yes, first of all, regional cooperation is a circle. It's a requirement of the EU integration, and it's also supposed to be a byproduct of it. So it's difficult because it's a circle that's supposed to nourish itself. There are tens and tens of initiatives and platforms that in an institutional way are supposed to promote regional cooperation, but all of them were done by the initiative and the funding from the EU, so kind of outside, without local ownership. So when Open Balkans came along, what made it special was that it was a locally produced initiative. So it was the countries from the region that take the initiative and form a platform together. Now, Open Balkans has three big problems when it comes to regional cooperation. It's not inclusive. So the three countries that are outside of it are not just outside of it, but they are opposed to it in a quite a strong way. It has done a negative impact to the relation between Albania and Kosovo, however impossible that sounds, but it's true. And also, it's not an institutional, there's no secretariat, there's no budget for it. So it's a very ad hoc thing that only when there's a meeting or something, then there are some agreements. And the final problem with it is that in many, many ways, it looks like a copy of the Berlin process when it comes to objectives and what it wants to achieve. I don't mean to strike it down. I think that all initiatives that, at least in principle, are value-based and want to promote something positive, there's nothing wrong with them to proceed. But when we have the Berlin process that has been finally revitalized, and it is quite inclusive, and there is a budget behind it, there are projects behind it, then it's a matter of priorities. Where do you invest more? Our countries are small and have limited diplomatic resources. So it's a matter of priorities, where to put most of the attention. The initiative came at a point of time when the Berlin process was actually quite stagnant, so I understand the rationale behind it. But now that it's revived, the important thing is to understand what can we learn from the first phase, and there is a lot to be learned, especially in terms of connectivity. And I really sincerely hope that Berlin Process 2.0 it's really focused on delivering some results that actually do positive things for regional cooperation. It's very difficult for me to travel to Sarajevo. It's very easy for me to come to Rome. It shouldn't be like that.
No.
So real concrete things that make regional cooperation much smoother and give it a real chance to have then locally produced and locally owned initiatives to succeed.
Okay, but obviously these are steps, I would like to say, and I would like to think that they are steps in the right direction that can help, getting to new phases which will be positive as time comes.
They are, if you are talking about Open Balkans in particular, it might be a good step, but the thing is how it affects then bilateral relations between countries in the region. So it needs to proceed with caution. And it has an open door policy, which is good, so anybody can join anytime, but it needs to proceed very cautiously because we might do more damage while wanting to do more good.
Mr. Martino, regional cooperation in the Western Balkans, is there a civil society pillar? You have this experience. How important is the involvement of civil society in strengthening and widening regional cooperation? What has been the contribution of the model developed as Berlin process? Should we ask for more from civil society?
I was probably hoping for an easier question, but I will try to answer as well as I can. I think that, of course, this is a bilateral process. We are asking something to civil society, but civil societies in the region are asking a lot also from external actors. That's because very often civil societies in the region feel besieged to some extent. In many situations, in many countries, they feel they are facing unfriendly governments. Very often the relationship between civil societies in the region and institution is not cooperative or friendly. So very often this has been the case in these last decades, I would say. Very often civil societies and actors in the civil societies tend to look outside of their own countries for support, be it financial support, be it structural support, and of course they are also looking for regional cooperation to strengthen their structures to make their requests more visible and stronger. I can give you an example. Again, as Osservatorio, we've been studying environmental organizations in the region, especially dealing with air pollution, because the Balkans, unfortunately, let's speak more concretely about the Western Balkans. In this last decade, I would say, have become the most polluted when it comes to air pollution. Cities like Skopje, for example, also Sarajevo, even Belgrade, places like Zenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and so on and so forth, Smederevo in Serbia. These organizations have been facing huge challenges, very often also because they were not facing only local institutions, but international investors. For example, in Smederevo, there's a smelter which is owned by a Chinese company, or in Zenica, where this local smelter is owned by ArcelorMittal, the Indian. In all these cases, there have been attempts to create regional networks to be able, to push forward, their, but they have been only partially successful. These organizations are very often, again, in difficult situation because when asked for the support of the institutions when dealing, for example, to the big investors, they, what they told us is we can do really nothing because the level we can reach with our actions it's much lower than what is requested needed to have an impact on the real situation. So I would say that asking is always a good thing to do. At the same time, we should listen a bit more to what civil societies in the region ask, especially the European Union, that Of course, this has been said a lot of times, it's very easy to blame the European Union for everything. The question is that the European Union is blamed because it's seen as a vital ally. It's not blamed because people, don't like the European Union. It's criticized because very often it's the big hope which keeps together also these chips of civil society who want to fight, for more democratic, and bottom-up, I would say, approach to solving issues in the region.
Thank you. Well, I think that we have managed to keep our time here on the podium, and we are now turning towards the floor, and we would like to have questions that you would like to ask us. Please. Professor Politi.
I wanted to know, from the panel, apart from the EU, which is of course so important, but what would be your best example of bilateral engagement, from a country that has worked effectively to, listen, civil society, support it. And also, if you think that there could be programs, not just bottom-up, which is, welcome, but also top-down. What sort of assistance in forming political elites is necessary in order, to create or modify existing elites? I understand it's quite complicated. Each country has its own times. But if we don't try, we will never see if, there is at least one or two persons that, evolve and change mind, or mid-level people that will come up and then, try to push more or to devise a better way to reform. Thank you very much.
Maybe we could each take a go at this, Madam Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much for the question. It's very important. It's highly important, I would say, especially in regard to good governance policies and how to increase how to use them to make stable societies. I think that what we need now in the region, not only in the Balkan and Black Sea region, but much wider in Europe, is to make the alliance with the people who are progressive, who are in favor for the future, who are committed to make positive changes. We need politicians with integrity that should be an example for others, how the one that is in power, in some position, should behave, what kind of values should prevail in the society, the real values, to work for the benefit of others. And I think that that is a basic one to combat corruption and to combat for real values in our societies. To make the alliance with civil society, with all the independent institutions who are in favor for good governance policies and for the policies that are for the benefit for the regions too. So I think that the alliance, not only inside of each country, but in the region, in the Europe, with the people with integrity that are in power, in different, not only in the governmental structures, but in general, in civil society, but in other institutions, are crucial for leading the region in changing the mindset, which is the most challenging and most difficult one. But the good governance, establishing good governance policies, actually are the best tool to fight for the stereotypes, to make the mindset, to make change in the mindset, and in combine with keeping the countries in the EU track, it will naturally lead to the change of the mindset of the citizens in our society and to change the societies in a positive way.
So in a way, you mean these are the specifications of the model that has to be followed, the model that will build this sort of society.
Not only for the Balkans, but in general.
Yes, in
I
general,
strongly
yes,
believe
but
that
the model,
it is yes,
the model.
Yes, the model.
Yes, Mrs. Chela.
Well, if I can try to answer the question about the successful bilateral, rather than when we take the whole EU, well, I think there are a lot of examples, mostly with countries in the Balkans and those EU member states who are in favor of enlargement. I find those states to be, and their cooperation with the states in the Balkans to be much more fruitful, because there is a relation of credibility and hope. If I have to take Albania, then of course Italy and Germany and Austria, these are seen as countries that will always be in favor of accession, and so the systems they bring, the programs they build are good and bring some change, but maybe not leaving others behind. There are good, for example, bilateral relation which is based on other things such as development, which when we can take then the example of Switzerland. And I think there's a very important actor in our region, at least in my country, and that's the United States. And there you have a strong and impactful bilateral relation, which sometimes pushes key reforms which are necessary for integration with a speed that would not be possible otherwise.
Mr. Martino, what is your view on this?
To a big extent, I don't know if it's working, the mic, I would, repeat to some extent what Ms. Chela just said. I mean, what I see as purely bilateral is either the United States to some extent, and especially in some countries. Otherwise, my perception is that if we speak about European countries, most of them, even the ones who had the biggest impact in moving the process, for example, for the Balkan integration, tend anyway to move in the context and in the framework of, multilateral European context. So Germany is, of course, the first that comes to my mind. Let's take, for example, the Berlin process, but still it was framed like European initiative, not a purely bilateral one. So I think this is a trend that we are seeing in these last years, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad one. I mean, I think it's what we can witness at the moment.
We have, as you see, we have a question from the public coming through the web. So, Mr. Martino, would you like to be the first to try so that we can give an answer to the question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the people here can see the question.
The question is, and I will read it out, what programs for civil society's resilience against propaganda campaigns do you think are useful?
First of all, because now there's a lot of, talk about fake news in the region and so on and so forth. I think that at least at the moment, because of very clear reasons, this is referred mostly to Russia, what's going on with the war in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. I would like to remind that a big part of the disinformation propaganda in the Balkan countries is internal. There's a lot of disinformation which comes from the countries itself. So it's not just about external actors like Russia, I mentioned. China could be another one, trying to manipulate the public opinion. From this point of view, I think that the only long-term, campaign, the only long-term, recipe or the way to address it is helping people to read better their news. I'm a journalist, so this is my profession. Yeah, that's it.
That is media literacy. We are talking a lot about media literacy, which is exactly this, helping people at a young age how to read and how to critically analyze the news. And I would go one step further, make media literacy part of the official education program. So you have to study it at school, because this is going to be a long-term problem. Today it's Russia, tomorrow for sure it's another thing. Media literacy, it takes a long time, so you need patience, but I think it's the only true recipe for that.
So it's a basic formation that has to be kept there.
It's
To bring up
yes,
within that.
how to critically and
yes.
not take for granted what you
Okay,
read. So.
Yes. Madam Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, it's a combination of both answers. I would say additionally that the recent situation actually forced our societies to become more agile and to quickly find a way to respond on this kind of situation that are arising because with having in mind the digital world today, the social media, the role of social media, they're not going to wait for us to find a way to write the strategy for disinformation, then to have a public debate about the strategy, disinformation, and so on. We need an actions now, and we need to prepare our society to be agile and to respond very quickly on the different situations. That's why we need practical tools, very exact ways of how to behave, and of course to find a way how to increase, as has been mentioned, media literacy, but on the other hand, the professional journalism on the other side.
Seriousness of it. The lady.
Oh, yes.
No, sorry, it's the lady in the back. Afterwards, yes. Give us a minute,
Two ladies.
please.
Good evening. I'm Dragana Broz. I'm professor here in Rome at university, but I'm coming from Belgrade. I was born in Belgrade, but for a long time out of my country. I would like to say just a few things about the cooperation between the countries in Balkans. I was teaching at a master course that was embracing 5 countries: Italy as a leader, as a European country, Bosnia, Serbia, Albania, and Macedonia. We had students from all these countries, and the proposal of our project was that the students were getting know-how from colleagues and professors, even from Italy and from the countries where they were coming from, and building up the projects in their own countries and sharing experience all together. It was 2009 when Serbian students first time put their feet in Bosnia, when Bosnian students put first time their feet in Serbia, in Albania, in Macedonia. And I have to admit that this experience is the best experience of cooperation. And I faced similar thing in a country that doesn't belong to the region that we are talking today, which is Lebanon and the Mediterranean region, with American University built up the relationship. So the young people, they love each other, they cooperate, they don't look at the officials as an example. And they search for a contact among themselves. So I think that the real feelings, because we talk about culture, psychology, and feelings, when we talk about stereotypes, young people cooperate beyond what is official policy and politics. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is exactly what came out of the panel, talking about education, starting from the beginning and building characters and building the way of seeing things and being honest towards the real picture. The lady. This is your turn.
Okay, well, thank you. And very interesting what you were saying also, because I was living in Lebanon for quite some time. And so, as a journalist, just one thing, I think we need to take a lot more of a responsibility on ourselves, because also what the lady was saying about the fact that youth and young people tend to cooperate a lot more. The problem is on top with editors and news cycles that are not listening, that are trying to shape the news. I think a lot of the issue is really right there. I'm speaking just as someone who works in that realm. That's all. Thank you.
Well, I'm afraid we're living in times where there is a battle on, which is exactly the two elements that are fighting, and I hope that the younger generation wins that fight, because it is very important, and they have a message, a more important message than anybody else, more than the publishers or the owners or the media or whatever. So it has to come to them to bring up something which is fresh and, you know, versatile and can really take up time and change things. We have time for another question. Solomon.
Thank you, Alex. I remember the times 20 years ago when you hosted the Thessaloniki summit in 2003, but we have today quite a different agenda from 2003. I would like, if it is not a bad taste to contradict the panelists, to share a different opinion. I do not share the opinion that the panacea for fighting fake news is media literacy. Media literacy is something important, but to believe that media literacy can change the situation is wrong. It is as wrong as to believe that the best way to fly from Rome to Washington is to everybody, each one of us who is a passenger, to be learned to drive an airplane. Media literacy is as complex as driving an airplane. So what we need and what is doable and what is not in the hands of everybody, of all of us, we cannot become experts in this because this is a huge new profession. This is a profession. What we need, however, is exactly the same what we have in either Facebook or Twitter or elsewhere, the blue dot. The blue dot which guarantees, which is the fact checker and guarantees that what is said there is true. And what is not true to be erased, to be deleted. This is the professional approach, and here we need the leadership of the governments, because it is very easy for the governments, let's educate the people. And this is my plea to NATO. We need a de-brainwashing project which to cover all member states of NATO. And of course, such like Ukraine, etc., affected by the propaganda.
But since you mentioned the panel and the media, I would like to have an answer, if we can. Mr. Martino first.
On this, we don't agree. I think that this is the work of every single citizen to be able to participate to public discussion and taking, decisions through interacting also with the media. I don't think that is the government's work to say what is true and what is not true. Of course, it's a multi-leveled discussion, but I don't think that it is too difficult to participate in democratic processes. Otherwise, if I have to ask somebody to tell me if something is true or not, I think there's some issue with our idea of democracy. That's my personal opinion.
Mr. Cella.
Media literacy is not like learning how to fly a plane. It is simple civic education and human rights education and critical thinking. It is putting young people in an environment where they can learn this. It is, for example, the environment that I found in Blagoevgrad in the American University in Bulgaria, where the teachers very simply teach you critical thinking, not to take things for granted. We are not talking about making the public an expert on the media. We're just talking about making the public put a little question mark when they read something or they see a photo. And yes, we can have de-brainwashing programs, but these are things to cure, to put medicine. Yes, we need medicine because some people are sick, but also we need education not to make them sick in the future.
Madam Deputy Prime Minister.
I'm pretty much in favor of putting a focus on critical thinking and how to make students since the young age to have a critical thinking, to be curious about the things and not take the things for granted. It is a huge topic, maybe for another conference. But since me and Mr. and Solomon, we are mathematicians, One of the possible solutions might be artificial intelligence and detecting the possibility of probability of if the news is false or not. That might be also one of the solutions, but I would be very careful in brainwashing programs and projects, because that might lead to something else, and I would be very cautious in that part. So.
Well, the time is up. As we can see, I wanted to thank you very much for being here today and participating in this round. And I hope that the floor was interested in what we had to say. Thank you again very much. And I would like to ask Ambassador Minuto Rizzo to tell us a few words in closing. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yanis. Congratulations. So, good evening, everybody. I hope you are not tired. It has been a long day, a long afternoon, but I think a very useful one. I mean, this is my opinion. I have digested so many information that I don't know if I'm able to tomorrow even to synthesize that and put it in good order. But this is what we try to do at the foundation. We try to have interesting subjects, to have possibly the best speakers, and we usually have speakers from the region, because they are the only person who are really able to speak their own problems. And we try to summarize as much as possible, but not for a specialized audience. We would like to have the general public to be aware of these issues. When you speak about enlargement, when you speak about fake news, when you speak about these things, so these are very important issues. It is very difficult to attract the public, a big public on that, because it's not so sexy in a way, but it's very important, and it's very important for the region, I think. And we try every year to build on that, and we continue to do that. So I really want to thank the moderators and the speakers, first of all the new friends, including Solomon, who last time we met, you say that Trieste is in the Balkans, so I remember that. It's one of your important say. And I thank you, the public, for staying here up to 7:30 or something in a December day. So thank you very much, e buonanotte a tutti, e grazie mille per l'attenzione.
Grazie, ambasciatore. Grazie. Da qui arriva.